Hi, how you doing? This is Richard Anter here from Once Wills and Trusts. I trust you're well. Um, you should either be seeing me live via my YouTube channel or my Facebook group or maybe a Facebook page or profile. So welcome, whether you catch me live or indeed on the replay, doesn't matter. Good to have you on board. So tonight is the second live stream I've done so far, and I want to talk about the so-called death tax. If you don't know what that is, inheritance tax. Yes, you are taxed even on death. Okay, and my job really as an estate planner is not just to write wills. I'm not just a will writer, but to help you plan your estate such that your loved ones, children, spouse, family members, extended family members, etc., benefit from your hard work, or maybe your parents' hard work, or your grandparents' hard work, to preserve that wealth and pay minimal tax. Effectively, that's the long and short of it, and doing it, within the system, shall we say, and making sure that not even just your next generation, but future generations or even bloodline are able to benefit from your hard work and your parents' hard work, etc. So the essence of estate planning is really about looking at what your estate really is, and your estate is comprised of your wealth. So if you're unsure about what your estate is, if you own property, whether it's realized in cash or not, doesn't matter. Stocks, shares, any assets, crypto, any inheritance, pension, life insurance, the whole shebang effectively. If you have no plan in place and something happened to you yesterday and it goes to probate, and probate basically is the government department for proving what you own or don't own, what debts are owed, etc., and making sure all those are paid off before any residual wealth left over goes to anyone else who you decide. That's assuming you have a will. And if you don't have a will, then the government will basically make a will on your behalf. So, being an estate planner, my job is to uh, really help you open your eyes to what is available to you, what perils could be looming if you don't make the right provisions or plans. On top of that, looking at the tax situation based on individual circumstances, because everyone's situation is different. You may be married, maybe living with somebody, um, etc. Okay, you may be single, you may be divorced, you may be widowed, you may be planning to get married, you may have just received an inheritance, and single, received an inheritance, and married, received an inheritance in the middle of a divorce. Okay, so the permutations, okay, and combinations are numerous, so to speak. Then you've got blended family scenarios, which mean maybe you're remarried and you have children from previous relationship, or you're single and have previous children from previous relationship, or you've adopted, or you're thinking of adopting, or you've fostered, etc. Okay, so you can imagine it can get quite complicated, and then there's the whole scenario of whether you're domiciled here or domiciled elsewhere, resident over here or not, etc. So not to get too complicated. So having an estate planner who understands both the law and your circumstances and enabling you to make a plan so it's as beneficial as possible to you and your family is really what you need, especially as your wealth increases. So if you're a homeowner or a business owner, a landlord, um, and you are trying to put off any form of planning, a lot of people seem to be reticent or apprehensive about talking about wills before they're 60 because they think it's going to trigger or jinx death or something along those lines. That's not the case. Okay, the earlier you plan, in fact, the better it will be for you and your family members. If you think about people like the Duke of Westminster and many wealthy people who die without having to pay a penny of tax, or have children who inherit without having to pay a penny of tax, it's because of generations of planning. It's not because of an accident. And I think, from memory, at least a couple of UK government chancellors who has intimated in one way, shape, or form that if you do pay inheritance tax, that it's your own fault. So effectively, it's a voluntary tax. So again, it's something that you should be planning for. So that's an introduction to the topic. I'm not going to talk about it all evening, else I'll probably bore you to death, which is not not my plan. My plan is really to open your eyes of understanding, so you are able to make an informed choice, assess your own personal circumstances, and then if you need help, then you can contact me or anyone who you feel comfortable speaking with to get advice along those lines. That's the main name of the game at the end of the day. So it's important to understand what's going on. Most people don't know what's happening. Statistics state that 2/3 of the population in the UK do not even have a will. A massive majority of people have wills and haven't reviewed it over years, and legislation has changed. So if you think just because you've got a will you're okay, and you're sitting on a couple of properties or even just one, um, you've got some savings, etc., and you think maybe you should review it and just even just have a peace of mind, it's worth the while. Okay, so really what I want to talk about is introduce the topic of what exactly inheritance tax is. Okay, um, and then just introduce some of the challenges maybe or perils that you need to kind of be aware of. And then I'll be doing a series of training, just breaking that down in more detail. Again, so you are able to learn. I think that it's important that you, as an individual, if you're hearing my voice, watching this program, watching this live stream, as an individual, have an understanding of basic finances. I think it's important. So whoever you speak to, you can challenge their knowledge, challenge the advice you're getting. They'll just put up with what you've been told, especially if you know better. Okay, because nothing worse than being misadvised. And this industry, the estate planning industry, is an unregulated one. So you need to speak to someone who's a professional. And that may not necessarily just be a solicitor. Don't be deceived. Okay, you need to have a specialist. All right. I'm not saying that solicitors are not specialists. I'm saying that you need a specialist who understands this area of law, not just generically speaking. All right. So, what is inheritance tax? So, effectively, inheritance tax is a tax that's levied upon the death of an individual. Okay. It can be levied during someone's lifetime, but that's kind of out of the context of this training. But effectively, if your wealth or your estate supersedes a statutory limit, then you could potentially be liable for inheritance tax up to 40% of the wealth. So just to put that into context, if your estate was £100,000 over the government allowance, then that's £40,000 tax due. Okay, all right, out of your estate. Now that's a big chunk of change, which your benefactors, your children, your loved ones will be without, or would have to be forced to pay if they're part of your executors, etc. And before they get a penny in their pocket. And just to put that in perspective, especially with what's happened with COVID, the government last year, based on the figures that they've announced, pocketed just shy of £5 billion in inheritance tax receipts, and the figures climbing this year. So, put that in context, people who died without a will or with a will but without proper planning had to pay inheritance tax, and the government, the crown, basically pocketed an additional £5 billion. Okay, and now the challenge is, you know, that's one thing for an individual who's passed away, who's died. Then the next challenge is if your children inherit that and again have no planning, and then something happens to them in the future with the wealth that they've inherited from yourselves, then that's double taxation, another 40% on money that's already been taxed the first time around, and that's a generational uh, generational inheritance tax. It's horrible. Okay, you've heard of compound interest. You understand how mortgages work, and the compounding of interest is just ridiculous. If you don't believe me, just do a really simple test in your own time. You can even Google it, but just imagine if you had a penny if you're given a penny every single day, or let me explain it properly. If you had a penny doubled every day. So day one, you were giving 1 penny, day two, you're giving 2p, day three, you're giving 4p, etc., etc. So it's doubled every single day. After how long do you think before you have multiple millions of pounds? Okay. So, or if I rephrase the question, after 30 days, how much money do you think you'd have? Do you think you'd be a millionaire? Would you accept £1 million up front, or would you wait and see how much you'd have at the end of that 30 days? All right, just Google it for yourself, and you'll probably be staggered and astounded if you don't know the answer already as to what that figure looks like. All right, and that's the power of compound interest. So when you have debts, banks love it because of compound interest. So imagine now inheritance tax, 40% paid over generations, over years, which could be prevented just with careful planning. All right. So just to put it in perspective. So with that said, all right, it's important that you assess your personal situation. If you're married, you have to assess it. If you have been divorced, it's imperative you assess your scenario and situation before. And if you know, there's lots of situations that people are going to go through or are going through. Maybe in the back of your mind, you're wondering, what should I do? Okay. And in the context of inheritance tax planning, that 40% can be prevented with careful planning and with time. Now, a will can only do so much. And just to put it into perspective without giving too much jargon away, your government allowance, your statutory government allowance, that's called the nil rate band. Let me just kind of write this down so you just have an idea. Okay. Right, and that's the nil rate band, and that actually could be revised. Okay, it hasn't been revised for a long time, probably about 12, 13 years plus. It currently stands at £325,000. So if your wealth exceeds that, which is quite easy, especially if you are based in the south of the UK, all right, south of England, should I say? So just owning one property, with a value over 325,000, especially if the mortgage has been paid off, then you already have potential problems. Okay, if you have life insurance and a property and the value exceeds 325,000, then you have potential problems. All right, it's quite easy, very easy, and you might just think, oh well, it's not monetized. I think I was speaking to someone the other day, and they thought, well, just because the house is not sold, then there's no tax. No, it's what you own, whether it's cash or capital assets that's not been liquidated yet. If it's in your name, you're going to get taxed, and that's the long and short of it. And you can be careful when I say this in your name. A lot of people seem to be putting properties in their children's name without careful planning, and that can cause an issue as well. So you've got to be careful. Now there's a new legislation, well, relatively new legislation that's come about. 2015, I believe it was ratified. 2017, where it was became more commonplace, and everyone understood it. It's very complicated, and it's called the residential nil rate band. Now it's not a default statutory provision, okay, but you could claim it if you're eligible for it, and this is where the complication takes place. So I've seen wills written in even as early as 2019, and advisors have not done a good job with the will because they probably don't understand it, so they didn't advise about it. They just kept it really simple. And if it's not claimed upon death within 2 years, then that's £175,000 additional allowance that you could be missing out on. So effectively, if you're married, and you have, you're married and you have children, or there's a long list of a qualification, but I'll just say children to cover that for now. That's potentially £1 million you could have as an allowance before any inheritance tax could be claimed. But it needs to be planned. And if you look at your will, assuming you have one, and you don't see anything pertaining to a residential nil rate band at all, then you need to seek advice very quickly and just make sure those things are put into place. they're quite specialist wills, but you at least know the job has been done. Um, and the next thing you need to look at in terms of inheritance tax planning is to stop the generational trap, which I mentioned earlier. And so the only way to do that really is to make sure that it's any gifts that you're making, upon death, ideally should be done with the use of a trust, so that it's not in your children's name, but they can still benefit. And you probably heard me say this before, if you've followed me in any way, shape, or form, that the secret to wealth is to own nothing but control everything. And so, really, if you want to understand how the rich play this game, then pretty much they don't own anything. So, if I can maybe paint a picture of that ownership, I don't know how true the story is, so I'm not going to use a gentleman's name, but we'll just I'll use the term Joe Bloggs for now, just to keep it really simple. So imagine Joe Bloggs, had a lovely. He was super rich. Okay, the world, knows him as a super rich individual, probably as a celebrity, and he's having a lovely celebrity party, with guests, coming dining and enjoying themselves, and he's got a lovely cat. Let's say a really massive cat, like a Mancoon cat. If you know what a Mancoon cat is, they look like tigers, but they're just domesticated cats. She's absolutely huge. And this cat, jumped on one of his guests, okay, on Joe Bloggs' guest, and her legs were scratched quite badly. And Joe Bloggs offered to appease the situation and make sure that she'll sort it out, but no, it wasn't enough. She wanted to sue Joe Bloggs, and Joe Bloggs said, "Look, I'm sorry, you can sue me, but it's not going to serve you in any way, shape, or form." But this lady's like, "Well, look, you're loaded. I'm going to sue you." So, cut a long story really short, she's successful with the suit, and she's won, but she doesn't get a penny at all from this lawsuit. When her lawyers have investigated, Joe Bloggs, even though he's super rich, on paper he's as broke as anything, because everything's either wrapped up in a trust or it's not in his name, or he hardly owns anything at all. And that's the moral of the story. So as much as they may be broke on paper and look like paupers on paper, they can still live as kings and queens. And ultimately, you utilize a trust. I hope that example kind of bears fruit, but you utilize a trust to kind of establish that type of scenario in your life. So that's when you see when celebrities are maybe declaring bankruptcy, but you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, well, how come they're still living like kings and queens? It's because it's a very strategic move. But in order to protect yourself from those types of threats to your wealth, then it needs to be planned properly, and certainly not for the purpose of defeating creditors or defeating anyone in particular, but preserving wealth for your loved ones and for your family members. So when you're speaking to an advisor, if they don't, and unfortunately, not many people understand trust. Unfortunately, it's just the truth. Okay, if you're speaking to a solicitor or a will writer, and you ask them questions about trust, and their eyes start to glaze or look confused, then maybe you need to question a bit more or find someone else to speak to. I mean, I've even speak to will writers and using the statement, "The secret to wealth is to own nothing and control everything," and they're asking me questions. And unfortunately, it's not taught. It's not taught enough. Not enough for people to have a full understanding. So you need to speak to someone who's a STEP affiliate. And when I say STEP stands for the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. Let me write that down for you. Whether they're solicitor or professional writers, that's the gold standard. As I said, it's an unregulated industry, so any decent advisor would be self-regulated. That means that they'll have insurance, they'll be studying regularly, at least have CPD of 24 hours plus a year of studying, and working towards that qualification of being STEP qualified. So a STEP affiliate would be a good start. Question them. If you're not bothered and just want a basic will, then fine, speak to a will writer. And I'm not putting will writers down, but I was once a will writer, and I realized there's a massive difference between being a will writer and being an estate planner. Um, it's not just about selling you a plan and selling you an LPA and selling you a property protection trust and see you later. It's about giving you advice that you can make an informed choice and making sure your wealth is protected. And you need to do that with the right advice. So if there's any recourse, you're protected in that respect. So I'm being blatantly honest about that. It's important. Okay, so the long and short of it is this. Just checking my time. Yeah, hitting 20 minutes. So I'm going to come off soon. I could talk freely on this subject. Review your wills. Okay, if you don't have one, get one. It's important. Um, if you feel that you have nothing to give away, so there's no point getting one. There's a lot more reasons to have a will than just about having something to give away. All right, you need to protect your. Excuse me. You have to protect your wealth. You have to protect your loved one. If you have children under the age of 18, you have to assign guardians. Okay, if you have valuables and heirlooms and things that are of sentimental value to you, and you want to go to someone specific, you need to have a will in place. If you have children, you need to have a will in place, whether they're over 18 or not. Okay, you need to assess situations, especially where mental health is concerned, because science is allowing people to live a lot longer. But mental health is a massive issue and challenge. And unfortunately, if you don't have certain documents in place or powers of attorney in place, the government will take over, okay, and they will make decisions on your behalf, which may not suit your values, may not suit your decisions, may not suit your situation. And hence, if you want to maintain control or have loved ones to maintain control over your affairs, health-wise or financially, then you need to have those types of get advice around those situations as well. Okay, which will help again toward inheritance tax planning. I've got a comment here. Let me just see what it's saying. Yeah, powers of attorney, indeed, exactly, Jay. They are really, really, really important. And then further to that, with the use of a will, again, if you do have a modicum of asset, you own a home, you're expecting an inheritance, and that's another conversation for another time. But even how you receive that inheritance, if your family members are alive, maybe convincing them to perhaps review and make sure it's done into a trust as opposed to directly in your name, because that can affect you. Okay, imagine you received imagine you're on specific benefits. Maybe you have a disability and you're unable to work. Okay, not you don't want to work, but you're unable to work, and maybe you're receiving certain types of benefits that are means tested, and you receive an inheritance, which okay might be nice, but if your benefits stop, that could be a massive problem. So how do you protect against that? All right. So there's a whole other conversation, but again, it's a massive deal. All right. And then again, if you have children, you want them to benefit without having to worry about paying higher taxes, because on paper now they look like they've got more money because they've received a lump sum. You need to utilize a will which is flexible enough that utilizes trusts, that allows you to have control, even decide how it's spent, if it's spent. Okay, rather than they just go and you've heard the story of maybe wealth is skipped a few generations. How do you preserve that wealth and keep it in the family rather than it's been disappearing? Then there's the argument of, if your children get married, predatory marriages are on the rise, unfortunately. Okay, how do you protect that? Your hard-earned effort, your parents' hard-earned effort, your grandparents' hard-earned effort. How do you stop that from just doing a sidestep into another family's wealth? Okay, it's the truth. I'm not even going to mess about it. And I'm sure you would agree. You're not going to work hard just for someone else to benefit from that because of a disagreement, a divorce, or whatever. So to control all those things, as well as inheritance tax, which is really the context of this particular live stream, a will is a good place to start. All right. So that was just my kind of two pence worth. Inheritance tax is a big deal. It is rising because a lot of people, I think, are quite blasé about wills, if they're worth it or not, and they definitely are. The government have put a lot of provisions in place to make sure that you don't have to pay it, but you need advice to make sure that that's organized. And without it, then unfortunately, there's not much that can be. Well, there's never. It's not all that's lost. It gets very expensive and perhaps quite challenging to do it post death. So you really want to do it ASAP. All right, so that's me done. Thank you so much for sticking with this live stream. I do appreciate it. I will be on again very soon. I'll be doing a lot more dedicated trainings just to just help you understand certain terminology, understanding, maybe in more detail about the nil rate band, for example, what the residential nil rate band is, understanding trust in a bit more detail. So I'll be doing a lot more specific teaching around those topics. So you can join my channel If you enjoyed this, especially if you're on YouTube, not YouTube, YouTube, then the thumbs up would really be appreciated. If you want to get notifications of any further training, then just hit that notification bell. If you've got any questions, just put it in the comments box. I'd much appreciate that. If you're on the Facebook group or on my profile, again, then check out the YouTube channel or request to join the Facebook group. No problem at all. All right. So thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you may be in the UK or around the world. And I'll see you again real soon. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.